Hello, welcome to Relentless Truth Media. My name is Ryan Campbell, and today, we are standing on the brink of a new age, or what's being termed as the age of disclosure. And it's becoming increasingly evident that the decisions made by people in our government are opening doors to a spiritual realm that later they're going to wish they had never opened. Since 2022, Congress has held 5 congressional hearings regarding this topic, which is about military sightings of unidentified flying objects that are seen in restricted airspace. Now, since these congressional hearings, the fascination with UFOs has become a worldwide phenomenon. And there are all sorts of people that claim to have these encounters, but the most credible witnesses seem to be military fighter pilots who have had some sort of interaction with these objects. Now, sometimes these interactions, they're caught on video or radar, and a witness at one of the last congressional hearings, he said that the U.S. government has multiple classified servers that are filled with hours and hours of military interactions with these UFOs. Now, also, if you listen to the testimonies of these military pilots and military personnel, it's very alarming what they're describing. These UFOs have appeared at military bases all over the world. Some of the most frequent sightings of UFOs, they occur at nuclear facilities. When they appear, they suddenly start having problems with the electrical equipment, the advanced radar systems, they start malfunctioning. And the UFOs have been known to activate and deactivate nuclear weapons. Now, multiple witnesses from different bases who have never met each other, as they said in the documentary called Age of Disclosure, that they had UFOs that were over their bases that were the size of football fields. One witness described the UFO that came over his military base as the size of a super Walmart.
Not just a Walmart, I mean a super Walmart. This thing was gargantuan.
He describes this object as looking like a miniature sun the size of a super Walmart. Retired U.S. Air Force Security Forces official Chaz King recounts a UAP event at Vandenberg Air Force Base involving a rectangular, matte black object with no windows that was, quote, the size of a football field.
So then on May 8th, 2026, Trump ordered the release of the first batch of what they're calling the UFO files from the Pentagon.
From the WLTX files tonight, President Trump has ordered the Secretary of War and other relevant departments and agencies to begin the process of identifying and releasing government files related to alien life, along with UFOs, unidentified flying objects.
All right, the Pentagon has just released a new batch of mysterious UAP files. Back in 2023, eyewitnesses near a classified security site described seeing a massive mother orb launching smaller orbs. And this new video from July 2025 shows 2 bright objects streaking through the sky, while another video shows an encounter from October 2024. The files also detail strange incidents in the western U.S. over 2 days in October 2023.
Now, the mainstream media would like you to believe that these objects that people are witnessing are aliens from far distant planets. But some of the most famous and respected researchers in the field of UFOs have recognized that this phenomenon is not what it portrays itself to be. Many researchers have warned that these appearances in restricted airspace in front of the United States military is staged. And these objects are purposely making their presence known as a form of psychological warfare. They're doing this for other reasons and other motives. Now, sometimes when these objects appear to people, they seem to bend the laws of physics. UFOs have been known to change size or shape in front of the viewer. They often appear as these strange hypnotic lights. UFOs have been known to change colors. With virtually every color the spectrum has been reported. Sometimes UFOs, they instantly appear and then disappear in front of people. Sometimes they've even been known to pass through solid objects. They're described by many witnesses as appearing more like an apparition than a nuts and bolts type object, like a flying saucer you'd see in the movies. Now, when it comes to the question, are we alone in the universe? Most people will readily agree that other life forms possibly exist. Now, where this agreement usually ends, however, is on the question of origin. Currently there are three main theories worth mentioning about the origins of these objects. First is called the extraterrestrial hypothesis. This simply suggests that these unidentified flying objects, they're visitors from far distant planets. And this theory is what pretty much dominates the mainstream media. Pew Research polls were done recently. They found that 65% of Americans do believe in aliens from other planets, and they do believe that that's possibly what we are seeing. So that's over half of Americans believe that. Now, the second theory is called the interdimensional hypothesis. And this theory suggests that UFOs are not from other planets, but from other dimensions or realities that coexist alongside our own. And this theory is gaining a lot of popularity. You're going to hear this in the media sometimes by politicians and some of the people in the military. Now, the third theory is called the biblical hypothesis. This suggests that these objects are the spiritual entities that are mentioned in the Bible that we call angels or fallen angels or demons. So I want to show you what some of the top experts in the world say about UFOs. Okay, now this is Dr. Jacques Vallée. He's a computer scientist and astrophysicist. He's one of the most famous UFO researchers in the world. And Dr. Vallée, he's addressed the United Nations on the subject of UFOs. He's considered the premier expert. Now, Dr. Vallée doesn't believe the Bible. He's not a Christian. I believe he's either atheist or agnostic. I'm not sure. But when he started his investigations, it was back in the early 1960s. And he said that he had witnessed a UFO fly over his home in France. And when he began researching, he believed that these were aliens from other planets, because that's what most people believed. But he said after researching this for a little while, for years, he realized that something else was taking place.
Vallée believes that UFOs are real, that they leave behind physical evidence, but that they don't necessarily come from outer space.
I'm talking about when I listen to the witnesses, and I try to listen very carefully to what people tell me. They are describing phenomena and objects that appear very often out of nowhere, disappear on the spot, objects that are changing shapes, objects that merge together. If the technology or the phenomenon can do that, what that tells me is that it is manipulating time and space dimensions in ways that are beyond our science. And if they can do that, they can be from anywhere, anytime. They don't have to be from a particular planet in outer space.
And he wrote many books on this topic. Here's a quote from one of his books. He says, "Consider what these UFO sightings have in common. In each case, the so-called spacecraft did not disappear by moving away, even at high speed. It simply vanished on the spot, or it slowly faded away. In other cases, UFOs have been reported to enter the ground." He says sometimes they fly into the ground, they just disappear. He says, "I hardly need to point out that this behavior is contrary to what physical objects do and quite impossible to duplicate with our current spacecraft technology. It is the behavior of an image or a holographic projection. Yet at other times, the objects have left material traces." So Dr. Vallée says that the objects have been documented as appearing and disappearing. Sometimes they even fly through other objects. He describes them kind of like a holographic projection, but he says that they do leave evidence behind that something has happened. He said, UFOs, when they land sometimes, they leave impressions in the ground. Things can be burned, the leaves and things like that. Also, electronic interference occurs. So if a UFO comes close to a car, they start having electrical problems. Also, animals, when let's say somebody's walking their dog and they see a UFO, that dog becomes very traumatized, it becomes very scared. So they do leave evidence behind that something is occurring. Now, he also said, "I think UFOs are perpetrating a deception by presenting their so-called occupants as being messengers from outer space." Now, Dr. Vallée, He thinks that they are purposely trying to get humans to believe they are from other planets, even though the evidence suggests something different. He also said in one of his books, I think it was Messengers of Deception, he says, an equally impressive parallel could be made between UFO occupants and the popular conception of demons. Now, Dr. Vallée doesn't even believe the Bible, but he noticed that UFOs and demonic activity have parallels, and that people's interactions with these objects are usually not very pleasant. And Dr. Vallée, by the way, he's the one that came up with the interdimensional theory, which says that UFOs are not from other planets, but they're from other different realities or another dimension. To me, if you come from a theological standpoint, that sounds kind of like a spiritual realm. Now, John Keel was another leading expert in the study of UFOs until he passed away in 2009. John Keel is a very interesting guy. He wrote numerous articles and books on this subject. He even had a Hollywood movie made about his experiences. It was released, I think, in the late 1990s. It was called Mothman Prophecies. And the actor Richard Gere played the character of John Keel. And that movie, just so you know, don't encourage you to go watch it, but it is based on true events. Now, John Keel, he considered himself agnostic. You know, he didn't believe the Bible. He was not a Christian when he began studying UFOs. And he assumed that what everybody told him, that these are visitors from far distant planets. But he said after a year of talking to witnesses and then traveling to hotspot locations where he saw the phenomenon himself, he said his ideas about what these objects are began to change. John Keel wrote a groundbreaking book. It's called Operation Trojan Horse, where he describes his interactions with these objects, and he has some very creepy experiences that also shows up in the movie Mothman Prophecies. Now, he says this in Operation Trojan Horse: the UFOs do not seem to exist as tangible manufactured objects. They do not conform to the accepted natural laws of our environment. The UFO manifestations seem to be, by and large, merely minor variations of the age-old demonological phenomenon. Okay, now what John Keel means by demonological phenomenon, he concluded that what people are seeing is demonic, and that these sightings have been occurring all through our history. John Keel says that the study of demons is something that people should take very seriously, and that the secular world doesn't take this seriously. He says, demonology is not just another crackpotology. The manifestations and occurrences described in this imposing literature are similar, if not entirely identical, to the UFO phenomenon itself. Victims of demon possession suffer the very same medical and emotional symptoms as the UFO contactee. Okay, so people's encounters with UFOs is very similar to when people encounter demons. Often the witnesses will describe having poltergeist types of experiences after they see a UFO. So they might witness a UFO and then they notice that their house is haunted. They got pictures falling off the walls. They hear footsteps in the middle of the night. You know, there's that thing that was connected to Skinwalker Ranch, where people that went out there, things would often follow them home. They would feel a presence in their home. Now, Dr. Vallée says that what most people report when they see a UFO is this. He says, most witnesses are not primarily reporting an object or a craft. They are reporting a light, a massive, multicolored, intense, pulsating light, a playful, fascinating, impressive, hypnotic light. So he says that the vast majority of UFO reports is really just lights in the skies, not your typical flying saucer like you see in the movies. Now, this is another famous UFO researcher. His name is Joe Jordan, and he was an investigator for MUFON, which stands for the Mutual UFO Network. It's a huge nonprofit organization. They collect data about UFO encounters. I believe it's a worldwide organization. And Joe Jordan, he's worked for them for over 30 years, so he knows what he's talking about. And he says what most people report seeing is glowing orbs. He says, when it gets to the shape of the object, The number one shape is actually not a saucer shape. It's actually just a fuzzy edge glowing object, like a glowing orb. It says way, way, way down the list that you get some guy who says, I actually saw the typical flying saucer. Okay, so what most people see when they report a UFO is like a ball of light or a glowing orb. Now, some people, they even describe UFOs as they look like a star, but that's moving in the sky. Now, that's very interesting because glowing orbs and flying lights is identical to the description of entities that are in the Bible that are called angels. In fact, in the book of Revelation, it refers to angels symbolically as stars. Revelation 12 says, "And behold, the great red dragon, and his tail drew a third part of the stars of heaven and did cast them to the earth." Now that verse is using symbolic language. The great red dragon is Satan. And then notice that it says his tail drew a third part of the stars of heaven. Okay, now the stars in this verse represent angels because in the Bible, angels are often described as these bright, illuminated beings. And it says, the tail, it says, and his tail drew a third part of the stars. The tail is a symbol for Satan's lies. And we get the meaning of that symbol in Isaiah 9:15. It says that the prophet that teaches lies, he is the tail. So what this verse is revealing to us is that Satan deceived 1/3 of the angels from heaven to join him in his rebellion against God, and that they were kicked out of heaven and they were cast to the earth. Now, we don't know the exact number of these fallen angels, but just to give you an idea, Revelation 9:16, which I'm going to talk about in future episodes, Revelation 9:16 calls Satan's army the 200 million army. Now, I'm not saying that's the exact number, but that's it's symbolic, just saying that he has a large number. In Revelation 7, it calls God's army, the people, the 144,000, which is symbolic. So the 200 million here is probably symbolic also, but it is a large number. Now, in Daniel 7:10, it describes the angels that minister to God. Some commentators put that in the billions. In Hebrews 12:22, the Apostle Paul, he calls the angels an innumerable company. So if 1/3 of those angels are now fallen, this means we have a very large number of fallen angels that are now on earth. Just give you another idea, remember when Jesus encountered the demoniac, the man that was possessed with a legion of demons. A legion, some commentaries put that from 3,000 to 6,000, some put it from 2,000 to 5,000. Either way, that one man had thousands of demons in him. And by the way, demons are fallen angels. That has always been the definition. I know there's a new definition people are using. They're calling them Nephilim. But in the Bible, if you're just using the Bible only, demons are fallen angels. All right, and I'll do a video in the future about the Nephilim. Now, Revelation 12 is one of the most unique chapters in all the Bible because it takes us behind the scenes and it describes a civil war that broke out between good angels and bad angels. We call this also the Great Controversy, and this war has been going on since the beginning of Earth's history. The Bible says, "And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him." So understanding this great controversy and this civil war that broke out in heaven is what gives us the correct worldview to understand what's going on with the UFO phenomenon. We're not dealing with visitors from far distant planets. This is really what we're seeing is the escalation of a spiritual war that the Bible says is going to deceive the whole world. So to understand this great controversy, we really need to understand angels, because angels, they play a major role in the end time events. You know, the Bible says that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Our battle at the end of time is not against other human beings, it's actually against these fallen angels and Satan. So in many places in the Bible, it describes angels as bright spiritual beings. This is what it says about the angel that rolled away the stone at the tomb of Jesus. It says his countenance was like lightning, and his raiment white as snow. And for fear of him, the keepers did shake, and they became as dead men. Okay, so angels, both good and bad, are beings of light. And when this angel appeared to the Roman soldiers at the tomb of Jesus, they became as dead men. They just passed out. Now, many commentators believe, or theologians believe, they were seeing the angel Gabriel. So this would have been something to see. The appearance of angels in the Bible usually terrifies the witness, and the angel will say to the person, "Fear not," and then give a message, because it's usually a traumatic experience for a human to see an angel for the first time. So put that in the context when people are witnessing UFOs. Now, angels have the capabilities to appear in any form they choose. When the angels appeared to Abraham in Genesis, they were in human form. But Abraham recognized them because the Holy Spirit had informed him that those were angels. But if they didn't want to be recognized, you wouldn't recognize them. In Hebrews 13:2, it says, "Be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares." So angels, they can appear as bright beings of light, or they can appear in human form. They can also appear, you'll see if you read a book like John Keel's book, Operation Trojan Horse, or his book, Mothman Prophecies, you'll realize that they can also appear in many other forms. So Ellen White, she warns us about fallen angels in the last days coming into our churches as in the form of believers. She says, evil angels in the form of believers will work in our ranks to bring in a strong spirit of unbelief. Let not even this discourage you, but bring a true heart to the help of the Lord against the powers of satanic agencies. These powers of evil will assemble in our meetings, not to receive a blessing, but to counterwork the influence of the Spirit of God. Okay, so these fallen angels, they can take the form of humans. They can come into our churches. They can cause disruptions. They can try to discourage us from our missions, the three angels' messages. And I would say this is not something in the future. This is already taking place right now. Also, angels have powers beyond anything that we can really even comprehend. Angels, some angels can manipulate the weather. Let me say this. I don't believe that all angels have the same kind of powers. I believe it's similar to humans. We all have different talents. I believe it's the same with the angels. Now, angels can manipulate the weather. Satan caused a tornado to kill Job's children. When Jesus was crossing the Sea of Galilee, Satan caused a storm to go after him. He had to say, "Peace, be still," and he calmed the storm. In Ezekiel, it describes the angels moving or traveling at the speed of lightning. It says, "And the living creatures," that's the angels, "ran and returned as the appearance of a flash of lightning." Okay, so they move as quickly as a flash of lightning. And this would explain how a UFO can travel, 60 miles in a few seconds, because they're extremely fast. So fallen angels, they can also work miracles. In the Exodus story, Satan was able to counterfeit some of the miracles from God. Satan turned the rods into serpents. He turned water into blood. And he also counterfeited the plague of frogs. Now, when Satan turns a rod into a serpent, it's a counterfeit. When God does it, it's a real live serpent. Now, it says, "And the magicians of Egypt, they did so with their enchantments." So the magicians and the sorcerers, they were using the powers of these fallen angels to do those miracles. And the Egyptians, they were worshiping these fallen angels, and in return, those fallen angels would give them those powers. This is why people, by the way, they get involved in the occult or witchcraft or secret societies. They're trying to summon the powers of these fallen angels. You'll often notice people in the music industry, they'll cover the one eye, or they'll wear satanic symbols on their clothing, on their instruments. The reason they're doing that is they're trying to summon the powers of those fallen angels to help their music. You have people in secret societies that are in our government, and they're doing these things because they want power, money, and influence. And by the way, there is an aspect to this UFO phenomenon where we have people in the occult that are in our government, and they're pushing this out in the forefront for purposely. We'll talk about that in another video. Now, what Satan is doing with the UFO phenomenon is he's repackaging witchcraft and the occult and spiritualism under a different disguise. So the modern era of the UFO phenomenon officially began in America, according to the Library of Congress, on June 24th, 1947, when civilian pilot Kenneth Arnold, he reported seeing 9 objects, glowing bright, flying in a V formation over Washington State's Mount Rainier. Now, he estimated their flight speed around 1,200 miles per hour, and he compared their motion to a saucer if you skipped it across the water. And this became the origin of the popular term flying saucer. Now, this sighting, it triggered a whole wave of sightings across our country. And in 1952, the United States Air Force, they were flooded with UFO reports. And to deal with all the chaos, they started a program called Project Blue Book to investigate the phenomenon. And astronomer and scientist Dr. J. Allen Hynek, he was the lead investigator. He's also considered another expert on the topic of UFOs. But when he started, he said he started as a skeptic. He didn't believe people were actually seeing anything. He thought they were making it up just to get attention. But he realized after investigating for a little while that people were seeing something and that something strange was taking place. Dr. Hynek, he said in a 1975 interview that many UFO reports seem to pertain more to accounts of poltergeists and other types of psychic manifestations than to actual solid items of nuts and bolts hardware. He says that is one of the reasons why I cannot accept the obvious explanation of UFOs as visitors from outer space. So notice that many of these investigators, after they study this for a little while, they start to conclude that this is not aliens from far distant planets. Now, many researchers have noticed that UFOs, they tend to appear during or before major historical events. In the book UFOs in Wartime, the author says, UFOs have also displayed another intriguing tendency. They have revealed themselves with alarming frequency during times of war and human conflict. The numbers seem to show that UFO sightings spike in times of war or what could be called imminent war. Okay, so for example, during World War II, fighter pilots saw what they nicknamed as Foo Fighters and flying around their airplanes. They described them as these balls of light or glowing orbs that would follow them from battle space to battle space. And at the time, they assumed that this was some sort of new Nazi technology, but they realized after the war that the Nazis didn't have anything like this. Now, it's also estimated that it wasn't just a few pilots. Some have estimated this was up to 1,000 pilots had reported this. Now, perhaps one of the best recorded ancient sightings was by the Jewish historian Josephus. And this was in May of 66 AD. This was before the destruction of Jerusalem. And I thought this was very fascinating because Jesus compared the destruction of Jerusalem to the end of the world. It's what we call a typology. In Matthew 24, Jesus was asked, tell us the signs of your coming and of the end of the world. And in that chapter, he mingles the destruction of Jerusalem and the end of the world together. And what he's saying is that many of those events, the way that Jerusalem was destroyed, will happen again on a larger scale to the whole world. So it would do us good to pay attention to what he said here. Now, in the book War of the Jews by Josephus, he listed 7 signs that occurred before the Romans destroyed Jerusalem. Now, all 7 are very interesting, but we're only going to cover 3 of them. Josephus said, there was a star resembling a sword which stood over the city and a comet that both continued for a whole year. Okay, So, summary, what they saw was a light in the sky over the city. It was in the shape of a sword. Now, it said a star, but it wasn't in space. We're talking about over the city. Then he says he saw another light flying over the city for a whole year, and the English translators, they put comet, but what he actually described was like a ball of light or a glowing orb. They just assumed he was talking about a comet, but it was in the sky, not in, what we consider outer space. So, the most interesting sign I want us to look at is Josephus said there were lights in the skies that looked like an army that surrounded Jerusalem. He said, on the 21st of Artemisium, the Jewish month of ER, this is late springtime, this is during May, there appeared a miraculous phenomenon passing belief. Indeed, what I'm about to relate would, I imagine, have been deemed a fable were it not for the narratives of other eyewitnesses. So other people saw this. He says, before sunset, throughout all parts of the country of Judea, chariots were seen in the air and armed battalions hurtling through the clouds and encompassing the city. Okay, so simply put, they saw an army of lights in the sky that surrounded the city of Jerusalem. Now, not only did Josephus record this, but also the Roman historian Tacitus, he recorded the same event, and he said, in the sky appeared a vision of armies in conflict of glittering armor. Okay, notice there's an illumination to this army. Now, what makes this event so fascinating is that it occurred 5 months before Jerusalem was surrounded by a literal Roman army led by General Cestius Gallus on November 17th in 66 AD. Now, remember what I said earlier, that researchers have noticed that throughout history, these lights in the skies, they always start to appear before or during major historical events. So, and Jesus said in Luke 21:20, and when you see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Jesus told the Christians that were living in Jerusalem in the first century that when they saw the city surrounded by armies, that this was a warning sign of its soon destruction. So if you think about it, the Christians, they actually got the warning twice. Once in the sky with what Josephus described, they saw an army of lights that surrounded the city. And then 5 months later, when a real Roman army showed up and surrounded the city. Now, if you're unfamiliar with this event, I just want to summarize it for you so you can understand the significance. What's going on here is called the Great Jewish Revolt. And what happened, the Jews and the Romans were fighting in 66 AD, and the Jews expelled the Romans from the city. Now, the Romans, they didn't like that, so they came back with an army. They surrounded the city, and they were outside the city walls for about a week. And for reasons unknown, they just they picked up and the army left. Now, the Christians living inside the city, they saw this. They said, God has removed the army, and this is the warning sign that Jesus gave us. And so they got their stuff, and they left the city, and they never came back. Now, it's a good thing they did leave the city, because 4 years later, in 70 AD, another Roman army came back. They surrounded the city. They sieged it for 5 months. They cut off the food supplies. They starved the people inside. It got so bad that Josephus said a woman named Mary ate her own baby. So this was a very tragic event that it didn't need to happen because they had plenty of warning signs that this was coming. The Romans, eventually, they got in. They destroyed everything. They killed, estimated close to like around 1 million people. They burned the temple to the ground. Exactly what Jesus said, not one stone should be left standing upon another. I want you to take note that before Jerusalem was destroyed, they were seeing lights in the skies. Remember that this whole story about Jerusalem's destruction is a foreshadowing of what happens at the end of time. I believe the lights people are seeing in the skies today should be taken as warning signs of a greater issue that is soon coming. These lights are a prelude that are They're priming us up for Earth's last day events. We're told in the book of Revelation that demonic activity will escalate at the end of time. What we're witnessing is what the book of Revelation describes as the opening of the bottomless pit. What that means is that we're going to see an increase in demonic activity like we've never seen before. Revelation 9 says, "And the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth. And to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. And he opened the bottomless pit, and there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth, and unto them was given power as the scorpions of the earth have power." Notice that this star that falls from heaven, this is a symbol for Satan. We know that because Jesus said, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven." In Isaiah 14, it says, "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer?" This star that falls from heaven, this is Satan. And then notice what he's doing. He's opening up the bottomless pit. Now, the bottomless pit is a symbolic prison for demons. It's the Greek word, the abyss. And we know it's a symbolic prison for demons because in Revelation 20, it says that Satan and his demons are bound in the bottomless pit during the 1,000-year millennium after Christ returns. Now, the bottomless pit is earth, but it also is a symbolic prison for demons. And Satan is opening this bottomless pit in Revelation 9, which represents that God is no longer restraining the fallen angels from making their presence known. Now, I'm going to talk about this Revelation 9 in another video because there was much more here that was connected to Matthew 24, the Roman army, that I didn't get into, but we'll talk about that in a future video. Now, what's going on here in Revelation 9, this represents a judgment against earth, and it's a warning that we are nearing the end of Earth's history. Ellen White says that this would happen as we near the close of time. She says, as we near the close of time, there will be greater and still greater external parade of heathen power. Heathen deities will manifest their signal power and will exhibit themselves before the cities of the world. She's saying that these fallen angels are going to reveal themselves to the worlds and to the cities of the world. So that means that these lights people are seeing in the sky is God trying to warn us that we are entering into a time of trouble and that we're going to see more demonic activity as we go into this time of trouble. Now, our government is cloaking this spiritual deception under the garb of some sort of new scientific discovery. And they've given these fallen angels a clinical name. They're calling them non-human intelligences. They want the public to think that this is a national security issue, when in reality, it's the climax of the great controversy. This is a spiritual war like we've never seen before. The opening of this bottomless pit is being termed by our government as the age of disclosure. But the Bible calls it something else. It calls it the battle of Armageddon. What's really going on here is an age of deception. In November of 2025, the government released I would say the government, it was actually made by an assistant to Steven Spielberg, but it was connected with the government, so I would really consider it a government propaganda film. And it was called Age of Disclosure.
Dan Farah joins us here in studio. Welcome to The Story Is. Congratulations on the documentary. It is one of the best documentaries I've ever seen and one of the most important documentaries I've ever seen, and literally can change the way you think about the world and our place in the universe, which is unbelievable. You spent 3.5 years working on this thing, right?
3.5 years, and couldn't be prouder to have it breaking through.
Talk to all these top people. So for people who haven't seen it, sort of what's the main thing that you've found?
So I interviewed 34 really high-level military, government, intelligence officials, and collectively they broke their silence to reveal that there's been an 80-year cover-up of the existence of non-human intelligent life. And on top of that, elements of the U.S. government have been involved in a high-stakes secret war with adversarial nations to reverse engineer technology of non-human origin.
And what they don't realize is by studying and interacting with these objects is that they're opening the door for more demonic activity. Now, in the great controversy, she says that during the time of ancient Israel, there were spiritualists that were communicating with familiar spirits that were called visitants from other worlds. She says, in the days of the Hebrews, there was a class of people who claimed, as do the spiritualists of today, to hold communication with the dead. But the familiar spirits, as these visitants from other worlds were called, are declared by the Bible to be spirits of devils. But spiritualism, which numbers its converts by the hundreds of thousands, yea, by the millions, has made its way into scientific circles, and it has invaded churches and has found favor in legislative bodies. This mammoth deception is but a revival in a new disguise. This UFO phenomenon is really spiritualism under a new disguise. Notice she says that the deception will make its way into scientific circles and has found favor in legislative bodies. That's exactly what we see going on in America. Now, in spiritualism, they have people that channel familiar spirits, where they're allowing demons to speak through them. And what this is, it's a form of demonic possession. And this is a man is named Daryl Annika, and he's internationally known for channeling what he calls an alien named Bashar. And Daryl, he's been on a lot of podcasts. He's doing a whole bunch of interviews. And what he's saying is the same thing that many other spiritualists or people who channel these aliens are saying. They're saying that from 2025 through 2030 is going to be the age of disclosure. Now, I don't take stock in what demons predict, but I want you to hear what he says here, because this lines up with some other things that are in the Bible. He says, this is what the alien Bashar told him. 2026 is the year of disclosure that will get people used to the understanding that extraterrestrials are with us and have been with us for a long time. 2027 is basically the target date we would have actual ETs being introduced to us through official channels. Okay, so he says 2026 is going to be the age of disclosure. The government's going to start releasing information. That's exactly what we see. And then in 2027, we'll be introduced to them literally. Okay, meaning the government is going to announce to the public that these ETs or non-human intelligences are among us. And that's exactly what we see with what Trump's releasing the UFO files.
And this is not only Bashar's prediction, it's a prediction from other psychics as well that have tapped into this. It does appear that in about 2027, we will actually be introduced openly to extraterrestrials. We will know they exist.
Now, another spiritualist whose name is, she's called the mother of the New Age movement. Her name is Alice A. Bailey. She also identified the years 2025 through 2030 as another type of age of disclosure. And she claims in her writings that a group of enlightened masters would physically manifest themselves on earth, and they're going to be led by this character she calls the Christ. And she said that the United Nations has been divinely inspired to serve as the primary political system for this new age Christ. Now, she also was very clear to say, if you read her writings, that this Christ that she's talking about is not exclusive to Christianity. This is the expected Messiah of all the other major religions, like the Jews, the Muslims, the Buddhists, Hindus, so forth. And she calls him a world teacher who is going to unite the nations under a new world order. Here's a little quote from her writings. She says, "He will come as a world teacher, and his main task will be rehabilitation of human thinking. He will find a world already organized by the United Nations. The major weapon of the Christ is energy of love in action. This energy must be directed through the United Nations to dissolve the barriers of national selfishness and pride. Only when the nations have learned to share the resources of the earth will the path be fully cleared for the Christ to walk openly among men." Okay, so the United Nations, they pretty much are basing most of what they're doing off of this woman's writings. And if you're unfamiliar with her, she did her writings through a method called automatic writing. And what that means is that she just basically puts her hand on the paper and the demons are writing the messages for her. And the United Nations, she's saying, is the primary political arm for these enlightened masters and this new age Christ that is coming. This is part of why they're doing Agenda 30, because they know that this is coming and they're preparing the world for it so that when the Christ appears, they'll have a political system already set up for him. Now, so why is the years 2027 through 2030 so important? Well, when you examine Bible chronology, you'll notice that the last 6,000 years can be divided into 3 great epochs of time, each consisting of a 2,000-year cycle of God's plan of salvation. So, for example, from Adam and Eve to Abraham was about 2,000 years. Okay, Abraham was born around 2000 BC. Now, from Abraham to Jesus, that was another 2,000-year cycle. And during that time, God, he preached the plan of salvation and the coming Savior for 2,000 years using the nation of Israel. Then Jesus was born around 4 BC. And from Jesus to our time, that was another 2,000-year cycle. And for the last 2,000 years, God has been preaching the plan of salvation, the second coming of Jesus, using the church. Jesus was baptized around 27 AD, and so that means that the 2,000-year anniversary of Jesus' baptism will be in 2027. His death on the cross was in 31 AD, and so that means that the years 2031 will be exactly 2,000 years from the crucifixion. So what I'm saying is that in the Bible, without exception, every 2,000 years, major events take place in God's plan of salvation. And what's happening right now is that we are reaching the end of the gospel age, and a new age is coming. And Satan knows that we're reaching the end of the gospel age, and he knows that he's going to be allowed to implement the New World Order and open the bottomless pit, because this is a judgment against humanity. The prophecies in the book of Revelation have to come true. And so we're reaching that period where we are now going into the time of trouble. And we'll talk more about this when we get into the video about Matthew chapter 24. But let me be very clear. I'm not at all saying that the world is going to end in 2031 or that the close of probation will be in 2031. I'm simply saying that we're entering, let me put it this way. When Jesus was asked, tell us the sign of your coming and of the end of the world, Jesus said, take heed that no man deceive you, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. A few verses later, he said, all of these are the beginning of sorrows. The very first warning sign that Jesus gave us was about a false Christ, and he said, that is the beginning of sorrows. Let me give you an example. The children of Israel were in the wilderness for 40 years before they went into the promised land. Okay, Jesus said, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. A generation is 40 years. Also, when the first abomination of desolation happened, you can go to one of my other videos to watch that. That was when the Jews, they chose Barabbas over Jesus. That was an abomination. The desolation of Jerusalem happened 40 years later. So I do not believe that we're reaching the end in 2031 because the church is not ready to go into the promised land. We're going to have to go through our wilderness period to get us ready. So I'm simply saying is that this is the beginning. I'm not at all declaring a day. There are people in Adventism that are declaring that 2031 and they're declaring this is the end of the 6,000 year period, which I do agree that Earth is 6,000 years old, but I do not think that it's going to end in 2031. Now, we should always be ready for the close of probation, no matter what day it is. Now, in 1972, Dr. J. Allen Hynek, he developed a scale to measure encounters with UFOs, and he called it close encounters. So close encounters of the first kind is where somebody might see one or more unidentified flying objects in the sky. That's the most commonly reported. A close encounter of the second kind is a sighting of UFOs that leave evidence behind, like something did appear like a frightened animal, land damage, or electronic interference. Now, a close encounter of the third kind has elements of the second kind, but it also includes the observation of an ET. So that would mean like a landed UFO and they see an alien outside the UFO. Now that's rare, but it is reported. They made a movie about that. It's called Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Now, then Close Encounters of the Fourth Kind. This is the most controversial, and it's been termed as an alien abduction. And reports of alien abductions have skyrocketed since the 1980s. And it's estimated that up to 5 million Americans have had the experience of being abducted by these entities known as the Greys. And many reported encountering a bright light, and then these Greys, they would levitate them out of their homes, and all of a sudden they'd be aboard spaceships. Sometimes the people just reported that the aliens were in their bedrooms or in their home. So in these abduction cases, it is rarely a pleasant experience. Abductees have reported being threatened by their alien captors. Some said they went through these painful medical procedures and experiments and examinations against their will. In some cases, the aliens even raped them. Now, Dr. Jacques Vallée, he points out in his book that if the aliens possess technology to travel, light years through space, why would they have to repeatedly kidnap random people and continue performing these weird, painful medical and sexual experiments? He says that the medical examinations to which abductees are said to be subjected, often accompanied by sadistic sexual manipulation, is reminiscent of the medieval tales of encounters with demons. Okay, Dr. Jacques Vallée, he doesn't even believe the Bible, but he says that what people are describing with alien abductions is very similar to the experiences people reported in the Dark Ages with demons. So in the Dark Ages, they called these demons that attack people in the night incubus or succubus. And psychologists, they have a scientific name for this. They call this sleep paralysis. Now, in sleep paralysis, it's been documented all over the world for thousands of years, and it's been reported in every culture. And typically what happens is the person, they wake up, it could be in the middle of the night or really early in the morning, and they feel paralyzed. They're awake, but they can't move. And often they'll see maybe a shadowy silhouette. They sometimes refer to this as the shadow man. And the person, they might feel pressure on their chest. They might hear voices. They might just feel a presence in the room with them. Now, with alien abductions, the shadowy figure now becomes an alien, and the people sometimes describe being taken aboard a spaceship. Now, in the Dark Ages, something similar happened. The people said they were taken to a witch's party or some sort of occult activity. So the Bible tells us that fallen angels have the capabilities to cause humans to see very vivid visions and dreams. When Satan was attacking Job, he caused him to have nightmares and visions. In Job 7, verse 14, it says, "When I say, my bed shall comfort me, then thou scared me with dreams and terrified me through visions." So Job, he's trying to find peace in his sleep from Satan's attacks, but Satan was even attacking him in his sleep through nightmares and visions. So the fallen angels, they cannot read your thoughts, but they can put thoughts into your mind and then make you believe those are your own thoughts. So spiritual warfare, it starts in the mind, and it's really about guarding your mind from Satan putting ideas into your mind. So any negative thought, that comes from the devil. You need to block that out. And yes, you can control your thoughts, but it takes work. You have to focus. Jesus has to help you. Now, Dr. John Miller, who studied alien abduction cases, he reported that when abductees asked the aliens, why are these painful medical procedures being performed on us, the aliens would respond back to the victim with a statement like, "We have the right to do this." Now, this brings us to an important aspect of these cases. Why were these people chosen to be abducted? So surveys by the doctors and researchers that have studied this have confirmed that the vast majority of abductees, they had shown an interest in the New Age movement or other Eastern occult religions. So many abductees, they claim to have a past involvement with astrology, astral projection, witchcraft, Ouija boards, and channeling. So this supports the argument that the UFO phenomenon is the result of demonic activity. Now, Joe Jordan, who studied alien abductions for many years, he said this whole experience that we have found has been a matter of opening a door. You open the door, whether purposely or unknowingly, to the experience. They didn't just randomly pick you. You gave them, permission by opening that door, either by dabbling in the paranormal or the occult. You may not even realize that you did it. Okay, so some people, they open up these doors to the devil through things that they're doing, and they don't even realize what they're doing. And due to God's rules of engagement, these demons, they cannot just insert themselves into your life unless you open a door for them. It's very similar to the Garden of Eden story. Satan could not just follow Adam and Eve around with continual temptations. He only had access to them when they came near the forbidden tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And the same rules apply to us today. But Satan has created many gateways to reach us. And dabbling in the occult in any form or fashion can leave you vulnerable. A door can be opened simply by watching an occult movie or listening to music created by people in the esoteric world. And just so you know, there are people that practice witchcraft and in secret societies in the occult. They now make Christian movies, they make Christian TV shows, they make Christian music. And the reason they're doing that is they're trying to get those doors open to you, and they know exactly what they're doing. There are all sorts of ways that people can open doors to Satan. And Satan is very legalistic, and if you leave a door open, he's going to come in. So, for example, Jesus stands at the door and he knocks, and you have to open the door and invite Jesus in. Satan, if you leave a door unlocked, he'll kick it in and he'll come right in. He's not going to ask you. So, and there's just a few examples of things that can open doors. There's many more things. These are just a few examples. Unconfessed sins. Okay, if you have sins that the Holy Spirit wants you to confess, you need to confess those sins. And we're not just talking about alien abductions. We're talking about spiritual attacks in general. Unforgiveness. If you're holding grudges against people, that can open a door to Satan. Things like gambling, drinking, drugs, pornography can all open doors. Generational sins can open doors. My grandfather was a Freemason. I have had to deal with that and confess those sins because those sins are passed down to the third and fourth generation, the Bible says. Jesus is faithful and just to forgive us our sins if we confess. Though reading your horoscope can also open doors, asking people, are you a Scorpio or a Leo? That comes from the occult. That will open doors to demons. Joe Jordan, who was part of the research group that studied these alien abductions, he said that when he first became an investigator, he was told by other researchers that, when a person was being abducted, there was nothing they could do to stop it. That once the abduction started, the person was pretty much at the mercy of the aliens until it was over. One day he was interviewing a victim, and that victim had been going through this experience for years, the alien abductions, and he had just become a Christian. And this time when he was being abducted, he cried out, "Jesus, help me." And the experience suddenly stopped. And since then, Joe Jordan has interviewed over 400 people that had the same thing happen. They were going through the alien abduction experience. They cried out, "Help me, Jesus." And the experience suddenly stopped. The aliens disappear and they wake up back in their bed. So this definitely proves that this is a spiritual phenomenon. And in this video, we only scratched the surface. There's a lot more to cover on this topic and how it relates to end-time events and Bible prophecy. And if you like this video, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe. And thank you so much for watching, and God bless.